Hey everyone, welcome to episode 3 in my game developer assignment series. If you're new to the series, I'd encourage you to go watch the introduction video for this series. In this series, I play the role of a developer in a mock video game studio where I get emails from my producer and then I address those emails. You're able to follow along at home by going to my GitHub and then going to the assignment that correlates with the episode and syncing up to that point. And then you can either try to do the assignment yourself or you can just follow along while I do it. But without further ado, let's read the prompt for this assignment. Hey Andrew, nice work on the damage text. That's what we did in assignment 2. We'd now like to continue revising the core game loop. Instead of using a life/level system, we'd like to try out a sort of endless or idle tower defense mode. This game mode will increase in difficulty just as the game does currently, but will decrease in difficulty whenever the player would lose life. The idea here is to keep the game's difficulty relative to the current strength of the player's towers. Our lead designer said think cookie clicker, but instead of clicking cookies, you're playing tower defense. Some details below for the first iteration. So, okay, this is fun. Let's see what the design implementations are. Or rather, let's see what the basic iteration details are. So endless mode. We'd like to be able to visualize the current difficulty level. This can be just a number for this first iteration. Whenever the player takes damage, the difficulty level should decrease. The difficulty level should increase on a set interval, just as it does now. And as a bonus, it would be nice to see how much gold the player is earning per second as some indication on how well they are doing. If you have any questions, please reach out. So this seems pretty cool to me. I just have the project opened right here in Visual Studio synced up to assignment 3. And before I jump into anything, I'm just going to run the game once, make sure everything is working, kind of refresh my brain on how it currently works. So you can click T to go into the level editor mode. And then we can put down some aesthetic blocks. Then we can use the scroll wheel to change to S. And the S blocks are where mobs spawn, the E is where mobs end, and the P does the path. So if you've been following along, you know this, but then you can click T again to exit the level editor mode, and you'll be in play mode, and these mobs right now just spawn. They go to the end. When they reach the end, rather, your player health in the top right there decreases until it hits 0. And once it hits 0, everything stops and you get a game over screen. So instead of this, what the devs would like to do is no more player health. And when they get to the end, instead of reducing the player health, we'll just reduce the difficulty. And then the game already ramps up in difficulty over time. So I can show that real quick. So I'll just skip back out. So we place some towers here, and what you'll see is as the player kills the tower and time goes on, we just spawn enemies faster and faster right now. And if we spawn them fast enough, then the player starts to lose. So you already see the enemies are almost getting by, and now they're getting by, and obviously the player will lose. So let's just hop right into this. We'll go into our Solution Explorer. Let's see. It has been a second since I've looked at the game, but remember the whole point of starting from existing code is this is traditionally how you'd work on a game. If you got hired, you wouldn't just start from scratch. So we have our game loop here, and every time it runs while we're in the play mode, updates play. If player health is less than or equal to 0, we're done. We show the damage text. We update the towers and the axes. Let's see here. Oh, we have a spawn timer right here. So this is what we use to determine how quickly we're going to spawn enemies. And we have this float, or rather this int here called spawn timer multiplier. And it looks like time in play mode. It looks like for every 5 seconds we're in play mode, we spawn things like one more multiple higher. which is cool. That sounds fine. And then this is just updating the enemies, telling them where to go, and then we update the physics and we check for deletion. So the first thing I think we're going to need to do is add some sort of difficulty score to the game. So right now that can just sort of be an abstract value. So I've just gone into game.h. I'm going to go below time and play mode, and I'm just going to add a new score called difficulty. And then when we enter play mode, or rather, I'm going to initialize it real quick in the constructor here. 1.0 is a fine value to initialize it to. And what we're going to say is while we're playing the game, every second we're in the game, we can just update. So right now we're just adding this delta time. Let's just say difficulty plus equals the delta time, and we'll just divide it by 60. So what this means is that and these are just arbitrary values right now, but I'm just trying to keep the numbers to something that kind of like makes sense in my head. But if we divide by 60, that means every minute we're in the play mode, the difficulty will go up by 1. And maybe we should actually just have that as 10. So that'd be for every 10 seconds I'm misclicking. For every 10 seconds we're in play mode, the difficulty will go up by 1. And then how we're going to tie this in, and instead of using this spawn multiplier, what we're going to say is spawn timer divided by spawn rate. We're going to just say, let's see here, this is a static float. Probably does not necessarily have to be a static float. The spawn rate will be 1. Actually, we could just have the spawn rate be the difficulty. That's fine. And then as the difficulty increases, that means that the spawn timer will increase faster and things will just spawn faster. And let's see. And then when something reaches the end, we were subtracting from the player health. And now, instead of subtracting from the player health, what we want to do is we don't want to do this anymore. Instead, we want to reduce the difficulty. So I'm going to say let's reduce the difficulty. Well, let's think here. We want to be a decent number. So it needs to be able to decrease faster than it would increase, or else if it's always increasing faster than it decreases, then well, actually, we can make it relative. Maybe making it relative is best. So whenever an enemy, and all I mean by that is instead of subtracting some constant value here, I actually think it might make sense to multiply this by some value. So let's just try 0.9. So this means every time an enemy reaches the end, the game will get 10% easier. So if it was really extremely difficult, that number was huge, and an enemy gets to the end, you'll get a huge reduction in difficulty. And then it'll have to ramp back up there. And I think that sort of incentivizes the player. And I am getting a little designy here instead of codey. But as the player of an idle game, you can't really lose the game, but you can definitely be more or less efficient with your time in the game. So, and usually with idle games as well, you want to let the player, of course, just set it and forget it and reap the benefits of the game running. But also, typically in idle games, you want to reward players who are actively participating in the game. And I think this does that because as the mobs are moving towards the end, if you're at your computer and you're actively placing towers and making sure that nothing gets to the end, and that as the game gets harder, you're responding and, dealing more damage to the towers, then you won't ever have an enemy hit the end and kind of set you back. Because this essentially is the punishment to the player. You're not going to lose the game if an enemy hits the end, but you are going to get set back some amount, and that set amount is 10%. So 10% on a ton of time invested is, it's a significant chunk. Anyways, so that does that. So we've done difficulty. We no longer reduce the player's health. And then one thing I would like to do as well, or one of the other requirements here, was they'd like to visualize the difficulty. And I think that's simple enough. So we're already drawing. Let's go to my draw function real quick. We're already drawing, draw play mode. Go to the definition. Let's see here. We're already drawing the player's, game over text. We're drawing the player's health. So instead of drawing the player's health, let's copy, or actually, let's not copy this. Let's just replace it proper. And we will say difficulty, and we'll say toString, and we'll say difficulty. And now they'll see the difficulty instead of the health. And then they'll be shown the player gold. Okay. And then the final thing that we'll want to do is that while we're in level editor mode, so if I go to update, level editor, you'll see that it's kind of hacky right now, but essentially while we're updating the level editor, we reset all of the play mode variables. And ideally this, in a better sort of state machine, this would all happen in the on enter. So I'll just write a note here. So this should probably happen in some sort of on enter mode or function for the play mode, but instead we're just doing the level editor. And then I believe the last thing that they would like to do is show the gold per second that they're earning. And we can do that probably pretty easily. Let's see. Okay, so it took me a second to think about this, but I've just added this gold gain, this update variable. And then under player gold, I'm just going to initialize this to 0. And then instead of just adding to the player's gold directly, what I would instead like to do is call a function called add gold, and I'll just pass in 1. And then we need a new game function, and it's going to be for play mode, and it's going to be called add gold. It's going to take an integer of how much gold we would like to add. And all that is going to do is add to the gold. And then, additionally, we'd like to say gold gained this update and add that there as well. And then if we scroll back up, I accidentally deleted this gold per second variable that we need. mf gold per second. And we're just going to initialize that to 0, gold per second. And then when we're in level editor mode, and this is kind of getting bad now, but we need to keep track of that. And then mi gold gain this update is 0. And then, okay, finally, I know I keep saying and then, when we go to update play, we go through the whole play update, and this does its thing, or whatever. And then at the very end, what we want to do is we want to say gold per second plus equals, and this is just like a little trick. We can say it equals the current gold per second. Holy cow. The current gold per second times 0.9 plus 0.1 times the gold we earned this update divided by, and we want to divide it by how many seconds this update took, and that will be our delta time as seconds. And what you could do is you could make this just the gold gain this update divided by seconds, but this will be a very thrashy number. So on your screen, it's going to show you like 1, the exact frame that you gained a gold. And then if you don't gain any gold, the next frame, it's going to show you 0. So it's a little more helpful. It's a little more useful of a number to sort of see almost like a rolling average of your gold per second. So if you get a huge influx of gold and then no gold, and then a huge influx of gold and then no gold, which can happen if you just think of those huge influxes being enemies dying, you want to see a more stable number showing you the gold per second instead of these spiky values, or else the player can't really get a sense of their effective gold per second. So I'm just going to save all of this and run the game, and we'll see if anything works. So you can see here our difficulty is just increasing in the play mode, but we have nothing spawning. So let's just make a simple track here. Do a start, an end, and a path. And then I'm just going to put a couple guys down. And there's definitely some bugs. Our gold per second is infinite, which seems kind of insane. The difficulty is also ramping up super fast. Oh, not super fast. Okay. Not too bad. Let's see what happens when the guy gets to the end. Kind of clicks down, clicks down. Nice. Nice. Yeah. This is actually working out pretty well. Yeah, so it's kind of cool. It was like all the enemies, they sort of, the difficulty ramped up. They all made it to the end. And then as they were pushing out, the difficulty dropped and we were able to catch back up. Let's see if we can fix this gold per second though. So 0.1 time. This is probably the issue if I had to take a guess. This is an integer and we're doing a division on it, and it might... Let's think here. Gold gain this update. Add gold. That might do it, but I am just thinking. So when we're in update, play mode, the first thing that we actually have to do is set the gold gain this update to 0, or else it'll just kind of grow the whole time. And then if the player's health is 0, that doesn't really matter. All right, let's just run this back. Okay, let's go into level editor mode, and let's make a little more fun of a path this time. So we'll say start here, end here, and I want this to be the path. And why not? I might as well just fill in some more blocks, and let's get some guys in here. Wow, this positioning is just terrible. Okay, the gold per second is infinite again, so that's not good. Let's go try to debug this. So I'm going to just put a breakpoint. Well, let's see here. In draw, we go to draw play. I'm gonna put a breakpoint here. Let's see here, the gold per second. How are we calculating this? Gold per second here. We'll continue. I guess once it's infinite, you're kind of screwed. Oh, okay. Wait. Delta time as seconds, 0.1 times 0. This should just be some number times 0 plus 0. I'm going to restart. Okay, that's fine. So at the beginning it is 0, but then at some point it is not 0. So I'm gonna go level editor mode. What happens if I go to level editor mode then back in? It stays at 0. Anywhere else we're setting gold per second to some weird value. What about gold gain this update? Anything weird happening here? I'm gonna break here the first time that gold is added. And then let's try that out. Whoops. let's go to level editor mode. And we'll see if I leave this debugging in or not. I suppose people probably want to see this. So add some things here. We just went to add gold. Our gold per second is not messed up yet. So let's go to where we use this in a calculation. So gold per second is 0. 0 times that plus 1 divided by delta time as seconds. And it's 220 microseconds. Really don't see why this would end up being infinite, and it's not. Puts it as 454. Okay, let's go to the next update. So the next update, this is just 454. That didn't make sense either. Why would this go up? Oh my goodness gracious. I have this as plus equals. I just meant to say equals. Okay. I'm a goofball. That's on me. All right. I'm going to just relaunch this. So it was plus equals, so it was just growing to infinity. People are probably already saw that way before I did. So let's do beginning, end, path, add some dudes in here. You can kind of see the issue here, like the gold per second is just not a very useful value. I suppose part of the issue with that is that our delta time is not, we're doing this as fast as we possibly can instead of measuring it and doing it like once every 10th of a second or something like that. So maybe that's actually a better way to go about this. So instead of resetting gold gained this update to 0, instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a gold per second timer. So I'm just going to say gold per second timer. I'm going to initialize that to 0. So gold per second timer is 0. And then when we go to calculate the gold per second, instead what we're going to do is say gold per second timer plus equals, delta time as seconds. And then if the gold per second timer is greater than 0.1, so we'll do this 10 times a second, then we will recalculate the gold per second. So, and then what we'll do is the gold gained this update will be divided by the gold per second timer. And then we'll set the gold per second timer to 0, and we'll say the gold gained this update 0. And then additionally, in update level editor, we just need to set the gold per second timer to 0. And now that gold per second will only be updated once every 10th of a second, which will be a lot less than doing it as fast as my computer can do it. So it'll be a more relevant value. And now you see the gold per second, moving around, but it's not just like 1 or 0 every single second. So get some more guys in here. We can see what we can get that gold per second up to. But yeah, I'll let this keep going in the background, but I think that's all we needed to do for this assignment today. So just to recap, we got rid of the level system. Well, we didn't really get rid of it. And this is a pretty common thing in game development. When somebody asks you to change something, oftentimes you don't delete the work that you already have. You just add something new and stop calling the old thing. So we've stopped using our level system, and instead we're just using a difficulty slider, and then as enemies get to the end, they'll decrease the difficulty, and this actually completely changes the game. Instead of seeing a game over screen and playing in that sort of way, the player instead will just be able to play as like an idle game. So, and it's actually a really interesting idle game because, as you kind of just saw there, the difficulty sort of like ebbs and flows. Since it's a tower defense game, usually when you lose a tower defense game, you sort of overwhelmingly lose the game. Like tons of enemies cross the line at the end. You'll have like 100 health and it'll go down to 0 in a matter of seconds. And then you kind of go back to this mode where you're just like farming it, which, just thinking about the game design from that point of view, it's really interesting because it would really reward the player for being at their computer and, as they see if they're able to adapt, like, oh my gosh, we're getting overwhelmed, I really don't want to lose my difficulty, they'll start adding more towers, or maybe in the future they'll be updating their towers or using some special ability to clear the enemies. But being reactive is a good feature to have in an idle game. And as you see, since this is all physics based still, it's getting quite sort of glitchy and crazy down there. I think there's probably some scaling that we can work on in the future, but we don't really have to worry about getting tasks assigned to us. They will come from our producer. Don't worry about that. So thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you want to, leave a comment, like, subscribe. It all really means a lot to me, and I appreciate it. And thanks so much. I'll see you in the next one.